Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Here with me, I have Taylor, Nellie, Elizabeth, Sarah, and myself, Bridget. We will be presenting on critical race theory and organizational effectiveness. So the goal of this workshop is to encourage the implementation of critical race theory practices as a way to strive for organizational effectiveness. For today's agenda, we will be starting off with an icebreaker activity. We will be looking at your identities. Then we will talk about organizational effectiveness and cultural alignment. We will see how CRT relates to organizational effectiveness, and we will later engage the audience in our main activity called Circle of Life. Then we will briefly engage in a debrief discussion via Jamboard. Lastly, we will do a call to action to provide suggestions of how organizations can be more effective utilizing CRT. So now we will be viewing a video about creating a space in organizations to speak about social justices, inclusivity, and equity.
I'm Erica Bennett. In these tumultuous times, leaders are being called upon to be courageous and lean into what can feel like deeply personal topics that are typically off limits in professional environments. Yet, given the times we live in now and that employees are talking about these issues in the workplace, employers have a unique opportunity to show their visible support for their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts by providing a safe space for workers to have respectful and honest conversations about social justice. In this short video, I would like to share 3 tips for leading vital conversations about social justice as a critical first step to building more inclusive workplaces for all, where people feel safe to share openly about the impacts of social and racial injustice on both their personal and professional lives. Tip 1, lean in with empathy and emotional intelligence. Listen, don't overthink it. Just start the conversation. You don't have to know it all to begin. By simply stating that you care, that you want to learn more, and that your goal is to create a space where people can share and be heard, you will immediately create space for others to feel comfortable. Your job is to listen deeply and to try to connect to what you're hearing. When listening to what can be traumatic stories and experiences that may not be a part of your life, lean in and try to put yourself into the speaker's shoes to better understand how social injustice deeply impacts the lived experiences of marginalized people. When people feel deeply seen and heard, it increases their sense that they are supported, and it allows them to feel a stronger sense of belonging and engagement within their organizations. Tip 2, lean into your discomfort. Crucial conversations are difficult because they require you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If your immediate reaction is no, I do not want to talk about these topics with my team, my colleagues, take a moment and look inside and ask yourself why the idea of talking about these topics is difficult for you. Proactively examine your discomfort. Sometimes we have a bias that may trigger us and could make it very difficult to proactively engage with others about topics such as race. Sometimes we feel we simply don't know enough about racial or social injustice to engage. During these conversations, you are going to need to get comfortable hearing about experiences that, frankly, may not be a part of your life, but most certainly have deeply impacted the lives of marginalized people. This is a time to listen and to be open and supportive. And while difficult, I promise you, you can do it. And your teams will absolutely appreciate you for doing so. Tip number 3, lean into the future. We are naturally resilient. It is our birthright. Yet during stressful times when there is so much prolonged anxiety and uncertainty about the world we're living in, it's so easy to lose sight that we can create the world we want to see and that we can thrive in light of challenging times. Many of you are thinking about really big ideals like social justice and allyship in a deeply profound way, maybe for the first time. This is a unique opportunity to partner with those we work with to see the ideals of social justice reflected within our organizations, to chart a new path to strong inclusive cultures where everyone feels they belong, can do their best work, they can thrive and feel they are contributing to the overall welfare of everyone we touch. Now, while this crisis has changed the way we work and interact, it has not changed who we are as human beings. We can continue to support each other with a deeper awareness of what it means to be human, to belong, and to ultimately be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you.
So as this video just showed, it is important to provide that space to discuss the racial and social justices in a way to promote equity and a sense of belonging for the workers, and that way it could allow the organization to be more effective.
I'm Erica Bennett, and
you're on mute.
Good morning, everyone. Before we move forward, we would like for everyone to get to know one another a bit more within a brave space. So first, we need each person to grab a pen or a pencil or a marker and a piece of paper. We will be using these materials for this activity today. So as you collect the items, as many as we may already know, everyone has a personal and social identity. Personal identities include an individual's name, unique characteristics, history, personality, and other traits that make one different from others. Social identities include similarities one has with other people, values and norms that one accepts, and the way one has learned to behave in social settings. This will be important to keep in mind while we do the activity. So before we begin, please gather your materials. Now grab your paper and fold it horizontally like this, as Nelly is now showing. Once you are done, you will be given 2 minutes to write your name in the front like this. And in the back of the paper, please write 3 identities you feel closest to. These may include both personal and or social identities. Once you are done, please put a thumbs up with your icon, or like this, so we know we can move forward. We will give you a few minutes and you may now start.
I have a question. Can they be like any identities, like you're saying, so like personal and social on the back?
Yes.
So like, for example, like it's just basically whatever we think makes us who we are, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm ready. I can't put my thumb up, but I'm ready.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So before we move forward, I would really like and appreciate if everyone will get a chance to express or share their name and any of the 3 identities, or even if you feel comfortable, all 3 identities, and maybe share a bit about your story. So can I please get a volunteer?
I'll go first.
Thank you.
So my whole name is Sarah Ruth Robles. I put daughter, woman, and Mexican American. I think Mexican American is the biggest identity that I hold. It wasn't until like these past 2 years where I started to understand my descent and started to just take pride in who I am and my family and the cultural traditions around me. And then acknowledging my ancestors as well.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to
I
share?
can go.
Thank you, Taylor.
So my full name is Taylor Danielle Hosey Papadopoulos, and the 3 identities that I put were female, cisgendered, student, and social worker. And I feel like this activity like really helped me to kind of like weave out like what makes me me, because I feel like we often aren't asked like who we are or like what, or we don't reflect on like what identities we have or hold. And so I appreciated that, because I think at first it was hard for me to think of my identities because I don't often think of them, which I feel like relates to me being a white individual in the United States.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you. Will anyone else like to share before we move forward?
Yes, I like to share. So
Thank
my
you.
name is Bridget Montserrat Correa Chive. That's my full name. I have 4 names, 2 first name, middle name, and 2 last names. I always feel that it's important to also acknowledge my mother's maiden name. So I always put it in there. The 3 identities that I chose are Latina, graduate, and wife. Although not married, I do feel that I have that sense of companionship with my partner. So I think that's one of the very important aspects of my life in these identities. And Latina, because I've always been very proud of just considering myself being Latina, Ecuadorian specifically, and a graduate student because I'm finally getting that diploma that I've worked really, really hard for.
Thank you, Bridget. And thank you for all for sharing and being open and brave enough to share your identities with us. As we can see, identities are essential to each of you. It makes up who you are. That is why it is important to acknowledge and how important your clients' and employees' identities are. And this also should be taken into consideration when decision-making occurs. In order to have an organizational effectiveness, we must consider and account for those individuals who help run this company. Also remembering that our clients, as well as their culture, social identities, and other individual factors matter as well. Thank you.
So with this, we are going to be talking about organizational effectiveness. And with organizational effectiveness, as you're looking at this chart, there's different components to achieve this and to make an organization successful. And today we are going to be talking about cultural alignment for our workshop today. And this definitely ties in with the previous icebreaker activity that we did, and how each one of our identities and our experiences really contribute for organizational effectiveness and the change that we want to see. So for cultural alignment, it's an asset to a company's growth because it represents a major strategic asset for business. In organizations where employees share a common value set and where culture is well defined, it's possible to see a peak in productivity, a lower turnover, and high employee satisfaction levels. This is because business leaders and managers are able to take decisions much faster and more efficiently. Having cultural alignment in your organization means that the whole company is focused on performance and on delivering a superior customer experience to clients. For cultural alignment, it can be achieved by 6 things. So the first would be recruiting the right people for the organization that aligns with the company's culture and are effective to take part in growing the company altogether. Looking further than experience and qualifications in hiring selections. The second one is monitor the relevance of values, and this needs constant monitoring and measuring. In the next video, you'll see as they discuss that as well. The third one is ensure leaders share the same values and are aware of implicit biases and other factors that can hinder the hiring process. The fourth one is measure culture adoption. Fifth is pilot performance with values. And the sixth is use recognition to drive behavioral change.
How do you build an organization that can survive and thrive in an uncertain world? By building a highly adaptable, vision-guided, values-driven culture that focuses on employees' needs and the employee experience. This goes much beyond choosing keywords and putting them on your walls. We have 3 principles. The first one is cultural capital is the new frontier of competitive advantage. The second one is cultural transformation begins with personal transformation. The third one is measurement matters. If you can measure it, you can manage it. So if your challenges are how to keep talented people, how to increase profitability and shareholder value, how to increase innovation, creativity, agility, and customer satisfaction, then the cultural assessment is the right tool. When we work with cultural assessment, we focus on personal values of your employees. What is important for them today? We focus as well on your current cultural value. How do you operate as an organization today? And we focus on the desired culture. What is important for you tomorrow to increase efficiency and to reach a high level of performance? While working on our mission with the cultural assessment tool, we have observed that it really helps to walk the talk within a company.
So as this video discussed, it's really important for cultural alignment to be part of an organizational structure. And to achieve efficiency within the organization, it is important to think of the future and look ahead at how an organization can achieve this with its employees and future employees.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for explaining organizational effectiveness and cultural alignment. So now I bet all of you are sitting in your seats wondering, how can we increase organizational effectiveness and what can help our culture align better with that of our employees? Never fear, critical race theory, which I'll be referring to as CRT, is a theory that developed originally in legal studies and will help to better answer some of these questions. CRT takes the stance that although race may be socially constructed in society, it has real-life impacts on people's experiences with oppression, discrimination, and marginalization. CRT highlights that race still matters and that we do not live in a race-neutral or a post-racial society. So how does this relate to organizations and agencies? Well, many health and human service agencies emulate and perpetuate the dynamics and structure of race and racism as comparable to the larger society. What this means is that agencies and organizations, such as your DMH program that we are here presenting at for today, tend to look like larger society when looking at the structure of race. Breaking this down even further, this means that many individuals who hold leadership positions or positions of power in organizations are typically going to be the same people who hold power in society. This shows that organizational structure typically mirrors racial structure in society overall, which is why CRT is so important for organizations. CRT is a theory and framework that organizations can utilize to challenge racism within organizations. There are multiple tenets in CRT which guide the theory. However, for the purpose of our presentation, our group will be focusing on racism is ordinary and intersectionality. Before I move into the next slides that go over the two tenets, I want to reiterate that an organization's culture aligning and representing that of its employees is essential. CRT can enhance and increase organizational effectiveness through areas such as cultural alignment. So we're going to go ahead and move into the first tenet, which is racism is ordinary. And just to give a brief explanation before we move into how it relates to organizational effectiveness, basically the tenet racism is ordinary highlights that racism is pervasive and normalized in society. And racism is an ordinary thing for individuals who are BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. And racism deeply impacts the experiences of BIPOC employees in the workplace. And some of the ways racism is ordinary tenet relates to the workplace is that when racism shows up in the workplace, it's not challenged, it's not disrupted, but rather it's normalized and accepted because racism is ordinary. So some of the examples that our group found was from chapter 10, Confronting Racism in Agencies and Organizations. And some of the ways that you may see racism show up in your DMH organization may be in specific policies that take a colorblindness approach. And taking a colorblindness approach is extremely problematic because it fails to challenge racially, implicitly, covertly, overtly, and structurally. And additionally, a colorblind approach ignores something such as a macroaggression, which is the macro form of a microaggression. And this is apparent in organizational policies such as you have to speak only English. So now, before we move to the next tenet, I want everybody to take a second and really think. You don't have to answer this out loud, but do our policies and our structures continue racial inequities, or do they challenge them? Okay, so we are now going to go ahead and move into the next tenet, which is intersectionality. So intersectionality is basically the concept that individuals have multiple identities that impact their experiences with intersecting systems of oppression. As you can see by the picture on the slide, there's many different social identities that a person holds. And intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and it's a lens through which you can see where power comes and collides, where it locks and intersects. It is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and privilege. And furthermore, structural intersectionality is concerned with people's positionality or social location. So I'm sure you're asking, like, what the heck does this have to do with organizational effectiveness? Well, I'm here to tell you. Taking intersectionality into consideration is important because research has found that staff respond to stimulus better when their culture aligns with that of the organization. If the organization is not honoring and acknowledging all of someone's identities and their lived experiences with intersecting systems of oppression, then it is unlikely that their cultural alignment will be feasible. Intersectionality and knowledge of intersectionality can enhance and increase cultural alignment within an organization, which in turn increases organizational effectiveness.
Wow, thank you, Taylor, for sharing that. It's great information. So how are we doing so far? How's everyone doing? Thumbs up.
Good.
Great. So I know it's been a long day, so if you guys, I'm gonna give you guys a quick second to just kind of take a breather, stretch, get your body moving. Perfect. So for this activity, it's called Circle of Power, and we will be using a Google Doc, which I will put in the chat room. And if you guys can go ahead and test that document, please. It should look like how it's on the screen, a circle. Okay, everyone's in, perfect. So I see you guys already picked your shapes, symbols. So we will be using these symbols to move either forward, backwards, stay, depending on your statement, depending on your response to the statements I will provide. So I will need you guys to listen and follow instructions as given. So if what I state is true to you, move forward. So let's see this. I'll move. Can you move one forward, please?
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. And then if the statement is not true for you, you will move your symbol back to the layer you were at. And if the statement is not relevant to you, or if you just wish to not respond, you may stay still in the layer you're at. So just keep in mind, no one will be checking up on you. You're the judge of your own responses. So you decide how you want to respond, if you move or not move. So we're gonna get a little test try on this and practice. I have 4 fun statements for you guys. So thank you for all going back to the first layer. So if you guys can please move forward if you have a pet. Okay. Now the second one is move forward if you are right-handed. Perfect. Okay. Move forward if you had breakfast this morning. And lastly, move backwards if you rely or have relied on public transportation. Okay. Okay, everyone. Good job. Thank you. If you guys can please put your symbols or shapes back to the first outer layer of the circle. Thank you. So we will be doing the same instructions, the same steps for the following statements. If you at any moment need to repeat a statement, please don't hesitate to let me know. I will repeat it. So here we go. The first one is step forward if you feel that your organization practices culture humility. Okay. Step forward if your culture and history is valued by your organization. Take a step back if you have been mistreated by the organization due to your race or ethnicity and other social identities. Okay. Step forward if your race and ethnicity is represented on the board of directors. Okay. Take one step back if you were ever uncomfortable about a joke related to your race, religion, ethnicity, gender, disability, or sexual orientation, but felt unsafe to confront the situation with your organization. Take one step back if you ever tried to change your appearance, mannerism, or behavior to fit in more with your organization's environment or culture. Step forward if you never asked to speak on behalf of a group of people who share the social identity with you. Lastly, take one step back if you feel comfortable making mistakes and not have people in leadership attribute your behavior to flaws in your racial group. Wow. Okay. Thank you all. Let me close this up. So that was a lot, right? So can I have someone share how they are feeling after this activity?
I think I was shocked to see that other my colleagues, have maybe experienced some of these things. Also, just how it made me aware of how important it is to start having these conversations and really holding our organization accountable. Um, to like what this you all have previously discussed with organization effectiveness and cultural alignment. It's important to hold the higher ups accountable for this.
Yes, definitely. I have a question, Sarah. Have you ever previously been asked any of these statements by any of your colleagues or other staff employees?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Have I what?
Have you ever been asked any of these statements before at your organization, or is this the first time you've ever had to reflect and process this?
The first time.
Okay, so thank you for sharing and being open to sharing. Does anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I would like to add, I think like kind of what Sarah was saying is that it shows like a big issue that like our DMH organization doesn't talk about power and race. And clearly there's a big difference in like the experience of like for example, like Sarah and I, it looked like our game pieces, she shared that she was kind of forward on it. So you could see like a big discrepancy with like the other colleagues in the room. And I think it just shows that like our organization is doing a disservice to everybody by not talking about the impact of racism, race, and power within the organization.
Right, you prove a good point, Taylor. So in regards to these responses you guys provided, I would like to also include 3 questions into the chat room. You guys are more than welcome to verbally share with the group or include your answers into the chat room. And let me see if you guys could read these. There you go. So the first one will be, where did your shape or symbol end? How do you feel by your symbol or shape position in this circle? Second one is, how can you apply what you learned here to improve your organization effectiveness? And 3, do you think using CRT will positively impact your organization? Like I mentioned, you are more than welcome to put your responses in the chat room. I will pick a few responses to share, and if anyone's willing to verbally share, you're more than welcome. I'll give you guys a few minutes.
I would actually like to share about my symbol. So when we were going over this with the questions that were asked, I was just waiting for something that related to myself. And I was pretty much stuck in the same place throughout, except for one of the questions that actually made me go back. So I was even further back than the starting line. It just made me feel like I was not included at all whatsoever into what the organization was doing in regards to having that inclusivity and inclusion and all that. So I did feel a little bit left out. This sucked for me. Also, this was the first time that I had these questions asked. So I think it just made me feel like I'm just there, kind of invisible, because it's not taking into consideration my background.
Thank you, Bridget. Your feelings are totally valid. I agree. When we are looking into power and privilege and being aware of all the disproportionality that we're facing, it can be uncomfortable, or not even comfortable, but worrisome as well. I appreciate also Sarah sharing. She stated that it's alarming to see how many stayed back, and definitely, yes, I saw that. And to challenge the culture mission statement was the second one. And she definitely agrees on implementing CRT. Will anyone else like to share before we move forward? Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this activity was to have all of you guys engaged and become aware of the diverse issues our intersecting identities face on a daily basis at workplace. As mentioned previously by my colleague Taylor, this tenet can be connected to racism is ordinary. So being able to recognize how our identities impact the way we are treated within our organization will help plan out a better structure, which includes equity, inclusivity, and diversity, and many more other factors that are needed in order to make a more effective organization of DMH. So every decision made that neglects each employee's and client's identity and implements policies and structures without considering them affects the organization's effectiveness in a negative way. So this is all for the activity. Thank you all for participating.
So now if you could please join us for our debrief discussion. We're going to be going into a Jamboard activity, and I will be providing the link on the chat box. So if you could please turn to that. Oh, sure. Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulties. Thank you. And there it is. So here you will be putting your answer anonymously. It would be on a little sticky note, and you could just paste it there. We will have two questions. And the first one is, how can CRT or intersectionality be implemented in your organization? So we have the first one that says providing trainings and seminars to all staff. So yes, bringing that awareness in definitely will create a more space to acknowledge it, and perhaps changing the values and the mission statements to reflect equity and inclusivity. Yes, definitely. And policies that center BIPOC employees. Yes. Again, bringing that inclusivity in will be key to have the workers or the employees feel included. And people in power should create the spaces to have these conversations and invite others to dismantle these acts of oppression and discrimination. Absolutely. So practices that acknowledge race. Yes. Again, it's the topic that we really much don't talk about enough or at all So bringing that awareness will definitely be a huge step into opening up this space. And then we have those who shape these policies, and have those who shape these policies be diverse, ranging from gender to ethnicity. Correct, yes. Living intersectionality. I'm sorry, using intersectionality rather than colorblindness. Absolutely. We have some places have that mentality that, oh no, I don't see color, but that's one of the reasons why this continues to be such an issue, because that mentality leads to nowhere. Thank you. And then I see a lot of ongoing trainings to just a one-time thing. Yes. With that, I think having ongoing trainings rather than a 1 3-hour training just will be more effective, because it would be something that they would be seeing continuously rather than just once in a blue moon. And then inviting CHUDH MSWs to share their CRT knowledge to allow employees to ask questions, follow-up questions. Perfect. CRTS framework and not just culture competency. Correct. Because again, CRT does have 6 tenets, and they're all very important. And I don't think I see any more new ones. Perfect, thank you. And does anybody want to go a little bit more into depth with their responses?
I just think that CRT, like from what I've learned from this workshop today, that like CRT gives like another layer of like cultural humility and cultural competency, because it's not just like acknowledging race and racism, it's challenging it. And I think that's sometimes might be what's missing from organizations in regards to diversity and inclusion, is having like not just acknowledging it, but also challenging it and disrupting it as well.
Right, yes, thank you. That's a form of dismantling that as well. I agree.
Yeah, I would like to also share, I think someone shared an important key fact where it says that to invite a CSUDH student, MSW student, and also any professional that is aware of what CRT is, and just bringing in their knowledge and sharing any activities, seminars, information, all of it, it's welcoming. And I think it will allow us all to learn more about CRT and also apply it to our field.
Absolutely, thank you. Having those people who are actually a little bit more aware of that and bringing that to the organizations will be very beneficial, yes. So then our next question would be, in what ways do you think your organization can support the conversations about race, power, and racism? And again, same thing, you could just put it on the post-it and it'll be completely anonymous. Acknowledging race and racism to begin with, of course. Something as simple as that, definitely. Monthly trainings that are mandated for all employees. Maybe this could be starting from the employees to the higher ups, to the HR and hiring processes. Providing brave spaces for employees to talk about race, yes. And then more workshops like these, yes, absolutely. What else? Leadership modeling and getting these conversations about race started, yes. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you for sharing, everyone. And could someone go in a little bit more in depth with how would that leadership modeling and getting the conversations about race started, how would that look?
So I put that there, and I think that would look like leaderships and like the board taking like the first leap of faith and like talking about race and racism, and not putting it on the, like not making it the responsibility of BIPOC employees. Like leadership and should like lead the way by showing that they're comfortable having these conversations, because how can they expect employees to have these conversations if they're not comfortable having them themselves?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's one of the biggest principles as to where to begin, because yeah, you have staff doing it, but what about the people basically who hold the power? They should be also held accountable for doing that change. Thank you. And does anyone else, will anyone else like to share a little bit more about their answer?
So I feel like I was the one that put providing more workshops like these. I think this workshop has been very helpful to reflecting on our own, what we're missing in our organization. So being constantly reminded and checking in on ourselves on these issues will be helpful and effective for our organization. So that's why I put that.
Great, thank you. Yes, I agree with that. So we have one more. It said that it would be cool if they also included literature and have book clubs to join and discuss. Yes, knowledge. Absolutely. Awareness, bring that acknowledgement as well. So definitely. Thank you very much.
Can I
Agree with
add
all
one
these.
more thing?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I also may be creating a space where it's like anonymous, where we can submit questions, or just things about race, racism, and power. Because, I know that some individuals, and maybe this talking from my own experience, it can be tricky to navigate these conversations, and a lot of people, don't really feel comfortable asking. So just creating a space where we can, submit these things and learn, and just feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It is a strong topic that not everybody is ready to have or talk about or discuss. So having that space to bring that anonymously with that little, feeling of safety, I think would be good for people to have, just so they could feel that comfort level, and be able to provide whatever it is that they're feeling. Thank you for that. And I believe that concludes our activity for now. Thank you.
Okay, so moving forward to our call of action. So as a way to ensure organizational effectiveness, it can be helpful to conduct a SWOT analysis, which will be useful in showing the positive and negative contributions, as well as the steps that should be taken to address the gaps within our agency. So the S stands for strengths, W for weaknesses, O for opportunities, and T for threats within an organization. So within DMH specifically, some of the identified strengths would be that the agency offers clinical supervision, both group and individual, which is something that employees tend to look for when applying for a job. This is important because it allows DMH employees to gather the hours needed to be able to obtain licensure in the future, which promotes professional development and organizational effectiveness as a whole. So DMH also offers different trainings and certification opportunities that will further enhance an employee's skills in areas of expertise, also promoting professional growth. These strengths are imperative for the organization's employees because it allows for the individuals to flourish within their work environment, and it also prepares them for upper management or leadership positions within the agency, striving to create a diverse and inclusive organization for all. However, one of the weaknesses we have identified within this agency would be the lacking of treating personnel to be able to effectively service the quantity of clients on their caseload. So, this weakness is a critical part of the effectiveness of services offered by the agency, given that the treating personnel should be able to ensure that the client's needs are being met and that treatment is provided on a weekly to bi-weekly basis. So, not only does this weakness affect the populations being served, but the employees as well. So, in order to ensure organizational effectiveness, the dignity and worth of a person should be accounted for, which entails clinicians, psychologists, case managers, and other treating professionals within DMH, as overloading caseloads can lead to burnout. Another weakness within DMH is a lack of diversity within the agency's board of directors, HR personnel, and even the treating mental health professionals that service the clients. This was identified as a weakness because clients are underrepresented and do not see themselves within the personnel that they come in contact with, which creates a sense of distrust and discomfort towards the organization. This can result in lack of organizational effectiveness, given that the organization is not providing a safe and nurturing environment for the populations that we are serving.
Yeah, so now while analyzing the opportunities of the organization, we have identified a few within DMH. The agency provides training for the organization's personnel as a way to encourage new skills. For instance, DMH offers specialized training that is offered to employees as a way to promote newly enhanced interventions and modalities that will best serve the populations within the agency. Now, when examining threats, we found that both the lack of funding and the idea of meeting productivity can result in harm within the effectiveness of DMH. Due to this lack of funding, many clients are not able to enroll in mental health services and their needs are not met. Another threat was found was the notion of productivity and having penalties for employees. Due to both of these, not all employees are able to meet productivity, and the pressure to do so can cause them to burn out. Some might even consider and start looking for a job elsewhere, which is the weakness we mentioned previously. So our call of action is to implement CRT-informed practices as a way to strive for organizational effectiveness. Within an organization, all values of the individual must be accounted for in an effort to ensure that employees and clients are being responsive to the diversity of cultural backgrounds. Through this activity or active involvement to create a multicultural organization and work environment, all cultures are actively being respected, which translate to a full inclusion for all, as opposed to some being privileged and others marginalized within the same organizational structure. Although this is prevalent in some agencies, it is important to comprehend how, despite the active efforts, it is not enough because privilege and power is not being addressed to its full capacity. For that reason, our group has created this workshop as a way to promote and encourage an anti-racism organization through utilizing a CRT lens, as organizations can begin to account for the hindrances that racism causes within society and institutions and begin to move forward. To move forward will mean that the organization commits to divert and multiculturalism. However, it is also to focuses to restore cohesion and respect in the workplace organization by building upon competency.
So, as previously discussed by our colleague Taylor, within the article Confronting Racism in Agencies and Organization, many agencies strive to be colorblind, viewing this as a commitment to fairness and equity, but this approach can leave the implicit bias and implicit racism that is internalized by white managers, supervisors, and employees. This can lead to the impact of the interviewing and hiring process for individuals of color, which also affects their ability to get hired within higher management positions or on board of directors. A colorblind approach also ignores the microaggressions that occur between colleagues, as well as macroaggressions that are encoded within the policies of the organization.
Yes. So actionable items that are CRT competent and promote organizational effectiveness. In the article previously mentioned by my colleague, we found that it was important to highlight Garrer and Miller's following statement, which follows: agencies can demonstrate a commitment to anti-racism by providing training resources such as books, videos, and hiring facilitators and consultants. Other resources are needed as well, like scholarships and fellowships, funding to support training for students and interns and employees of color to enhance their career. This ties back to the importance of ensuring organizational effectiveness by utilizing CRT approach in DMH. If this approach is considered, the agency will, 1, focus on increasing awareness about the impact the agency structure and policies can have on the experience of the staff and clients as it relates to their social identities, and 2, analyze how these differences influence decision-making within the organization, and 3, lastly, it will bring attention on the impact of any changes on specific groups of people within the organization by virtue of their social identities and group identifications. Using CRT is an entirely new and refreshing perspective for the agency, which will bring a lot of reflecting and awareness to improve the agency effectiveness. Thank you.
So with this, we invite you to start creating your brave space now within the organization. I welcome you to follow along as I read this. You're more than welcome to unmute yourself if you like to read it out loud with me. But this is the start of creating your own brave space and really implementing all of the topics and the things that we discussed today. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds in this space. We seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We seek to amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. I thank you all for joining us today. And I thank my colleagues as well. And we really hope that this is the start to implementing CRT and intersectionality within your organization and creating these brave spaces so individuals can feel seen and heard and provide equitable change.